had worked in the Great Repository for 60 years. In all that time, she had never found anything that scared her, until today. The repository floated in orbit around Ascendance Prime, a massive station filled with the collected knowledge of 12 species and 100,000 years of history. Was a tall being with silver skin and 4 eyes that could read data streams the way others read books. She was an archivist, which meant she spent her days organizing old files that nobody cared about anymore. It was boring work, safe work, the kind of work that let her mind wander while her hands stayed busy. She was sorting through damaged files from the Umbral Wars when she found the first fragment. It was just a piece of corrupted data, probably meaningless, but something about it made her stop. The fragment mentioned a species, not one of the 12, a 13th species. Checked the official records. The Conquered of 12 had always been 12 species. That was the whole point of the name. There had never been a 13th member. The histories were clear on this. But the fragment was old, very old. It came from the time of the Umbral Wars, when the galaxy had nearly been destroyed by invaders from the void between galaxies, and it clearly mentioned 13 species fighting together. She searched for more. What she found made her heart beat faster. There were fragments everywhere, hidden in corrupted files and damaged records, small pieces that had escaped whatever had destroyed the rest. They spoke of a species that should not exist, a species that had been erased. The fragments used strange words to describe them, words like spite and grudge and vengeance, words that had to look up because they had no direct translation in her language. The closest meaning she could find was hurting others because they hurt you first, even when it costs you everything. It seemed like madness. Why would anyone do that? One fragment called them the species that would not stop. Another mentioned something called hatred inheritance, where children were taught to continue fights their parents had started. A third spoke of soldiers who froze themselves for centuries just to wake up and keep fighting a war they could never win. Felt cold. These did not sound like civilized beings. They sounded like monsters. But the strangest thing was not what the fragments said. It was that they existed at all. Someone had tried very hard to erase this species from history. They had scrubbed databases, burned records, and silenced anyone who remembered. They had almost succeeded. Almost. Gathered everything she had found and brought it to the elder archivists. These were the oldest and keepers of knowledge in the repository. They would know what to do. The chief archivist was named Prime. He was ancient, even by standards, and his silver skin had faded to gray. He listened to his report without expression. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. "You will delete these files," he said finally. "You will never speak of this again. You are being reassigned to the Agricultural Records Division." Could not believe what she was hearing. But this is a major historical discovery. An entire species has been erased from. There is no discovery. Prime's voice was hard. There is no 13th species. There never was. Do you understand? Understood. She understood that the elder archivists already knew. They had always known. The erasure was not an accident or an oversight. It was a choice. She said nothing. She nodded and left the chamber. But before she reported to her new assignment, every fragment she had found to a hidden data crystal. That night she left the repository and traveled to the lower levels of Ascendance Prime. Down here, far from the clean halls of knowledge and power, lived those who had fallen from grace, criminals, exiles. And one disgraced historian named was not. He was a small creature with too many eyes and not enough patience. 20 years ago, he had published a paper claiming that the Conquered had its own history. He had been stripped of his titles, banned from the repository, and exiled to the lower levels. Everyone said he was crazy, now wondered if he had simply been right. She found him in a tiny room filled with old data screens and handwritten notes. He looked at her with suspicion when she entered. "I know who you are," he said. "Repository archivist, come to mock the mad historian." "I came to show you something," held out the data crystal. "I found evidence of a 13th species. The conquered erased them from history. When I reported it, they tried to bury it again." Many eyes went wide. He took the crystal with shaking hands and began to read. As he did, his expression changed from suspicion to shock to something that looked like joy. "I knew it," he whispered. "I always knew they were hiding something, but this is bigger than I imagined." They worked together through the night, piecing together fragments and filling in gaps. By morning, they had found something important. Hidden in one of the corrupted files was a coordinate, a location in space. The coordinate pointed to a solar system at the edge of the galaxy. According to official records, the system was under quarantine. It was listed as Containment Protocol Omega and marked with warnings in 17 languages. The warnings said the system was dead, contaminated, dangerous. No one was allowed to go there. No one had gone there in thousands of years. "This is where they are," said. "The 13th species, they quarantined them." Studied the warnings more carefully. Something about them bothered her. They spoke of biological contamination and extinction events. They were designed to keep people away. But they were also very old, and they were placed facing outward toward the rest of the galaxy. "The quarantine," she said slowly. "It is not meant to keep something dangerous inside." Looked at her. "Then what is it for?" Felt a chill run through her body. "It is meant to keep us out. The galaxy is not being protected from them. They are being hidden from the galaxy." They stared at each other in the dim light of the cramped room. Outside, the great machine of the conquered continued to turn, built on lies that were older than most civilizations. Somewhere at the edge of the galaxy, in a system that everyone had been told was dead, the truth was waiting. And was going to find it. The journey to the quarantine system took 3 weeks, and traveled in a small cargo ship that had bought years ago with the last of his money. It was old and slow, but it was also unregistered. No one would track them. As they approached the edge of the galaxy, the warning beacons began to appear. They floated in space like ancient sentinels, broadcasting their messages of death and contamination. The messages were recorded in 17 different languages, and they all said the same thing. "Do not enter. This system is dead. All life has been extinguished. Biological contamination makes survival impossible." Guided the ship past the beacons. Their warnings grew louder, more urgent, but nothing tried to stop them. The quarantine network was old. It had been built to scare people away, not to physically prevent entry. After all, why would anyone want to visit a dead system? They passed through the outer boundary and entered the solar system. 8 planets orbited a yellow star, and the third planet from the star was blue and green and covered with clouds. "That is not a dead world," whispered. Could not speak. She could only stare at the planet below. It was beautiful. It was alive. And according to every record in the galaxy, it did not exist. Then the ships appeared. They came from nowhere, rising up from the planet like angry insects. There were dozens of them, and they moved fast, faster than anything had ever seen. The ships were strange. They were not elegant like conquered vessels. They were blocky and rough, covered with sharp angles and exposed machinery. They looked like they had been built by someone who cared more about function than beauty. They were also heavily armed. "We are surrounded," said. His voice was calm, but could see as many eyes blinking rapidly with fear. A message came through their communication system. The language was old and broken, a strange version of the conquered trade tongue that had not been spoken in thousands of years. "Unknown vessel, you will follow, you will not resist. Resistance means death." They followed. The ships escorted them down through the atmosphere. Below could see continents and oceans, forests and deserts, and cities, massive cities that glowed with light and hummed with energy. They landed on a platform near the largest city. Armed figures surrounded the ship immediately. When and stepped outside, they got their first look at the 13th species. They were strange creatures. They stood on two legs and had two arms. Their skin came in different colors, from pale pink to deep brown. They had hair on their heads and small eyes that watched everything with sharp intelligence. They were also smaller than expected. The tallest of them barely reached her shoulder, but there was something in the way they stood, the way they held their weapons, that made her feel like the small one. One of them stepped forward. It was a female, older than the others, with gray in her hair and lines on her face. She studied and for a long moment. "You are from the Conquered," she said. Her command of the trade language was better than the others. "You should not be here. No one from the Conquered has come here in 97,000 years. 97,000 years. The number hit like a physical blow. These people had been isolated for 97,000 years. "We came looking for the truth," said. "We found records, fragments, evidence that your species was erased from history." The female's expression did not change. "My name is Cole. I am the director of the Human Historical Preservation Bureau. You have questions, we have answers. Come with me." Humans, that was what they called themselves, humans. Led them through the city. She called it New Geneva. It was the capital of something called the United Earth Government. As they walked, explained what had happened to her people. "We know we were erased," she said. "We have always known. When the conquered ships came to establish the quarantine, they told us we would be forgotten. They said the galaxy would move on without us, and in time, it would be as if we never existed." "Why?" asked. "Why would they do this to you?" Smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Because we scared them, we still do." She brought them to a massive building in the center of the city. Inside was the largest archive had ever seen. Millions of records preserved across thousands of generations. The humans called it the Archive of Remembrance. "When the Conquered told us we would be forgotten, we decided to remember everything," said. "Every name, every date, every crime committed against us. We wrote it all down and passed it to our children, and they passed it to their children. For 97,000 years we have remembered." She led them to a central chamber where a massive screen displayed images and recordings. Some were so old that the technology used to create them no longer existed, but the humans had found ways to preserve them anyway. "You want to know why they erased us?" said. She pressed a control and the screen lit up with images of war, ships burning, planets dying, creatures that looked like living shadows consuming everything in their path. "The Umbra Wars," whispered. "Yes, the war that nearly ended everything. The war that the Conquered says was won by the united strength of the 12. Turned to face them and her eyes were hard. "That is a lie. The Conquered did not win that war. They were ready to surrender. They had already begun negotiating terms with the Dominion." "Then who won?" asked. Smile returned. This time it reached her eyes. "We did. Humanity won that war. We were the smallest and weakest member of the Conquered. We had been part of the Alliance for less than 200 years. The other species called us primitive, short-lived, insignificant." She pressed another control. The screen showed human ships, crude and ugly compared to conquered vessels, flying directly into the heart of the enemy fleet. "But when the Dominion came, we were the only ones who refused to surrender. We fought when logic said fighting was pointless. We died when survival said we should run. We kept going when every calculation said we should stop." The images showed battle after battle. Human ships ramming enemy vessels. Human soldiers charging into certain death. Human colonies burning but never surrendering. "We won because we could not accept losing. We won because we would rather die than give up. We won because we have a word that no other species in the galaxy understands." "What word?" asked. looked at her with eyes that had seen 97,000 years of isolation and abandonment. "Spite," she said. "We kept fighting because we hated our enemies more than we loved ourselves. And when the war was over, the conquered looked at us and realized something terrifying." She leaned closer and felt very small. "If we could hate our enemies that much, we could hate anyone that much, including them." The screen behind her showed the final image. A vote, 11 species voting yes, 1 voting no, and in the corner a small notation. Motion carried. Species designation human, to be quarantined and erased from all records. "They did not imprison us because we were weak," said. "They imprisoned us because we won. And they could never allow the galaxy to know what we are capable of when we have nothing left to lose." The archive of remembrance held 97,000 years of human history, but the oldest records, the ones that mattered most, came from the time of the Umbral Wars. Cole showed them too, and piece by piece, letting the truth unfold like a wound that had never healed. The Umbral Dominion came from the void between galaxies. They were not a species in the normal sense. They were a hive mind, billions of creatures sharing one consciousness. They had consumed 11 galaxies before they found the Milky Way. They had never been defeated. When they arrived, the conquered calculated the odds of survival. The numbers were not good. The Dominion had more ships, more soldiers, more resources. They also had time. They were patient. They could fight for 1,000 years without tiring. The conquered could not. Within 50 years, the war was going badly. Within 100 years, it was lost. The elder species began to negotiate. Better to surrender and survive than fight and die. It was the logical choice, the rational choice. Humanity disagreed. The recordings showed the Council of 12 meeting to discuss terms of surrender. The human ambassador was a young woman named Sarah. She stood before 11 species that considered humans to be children, primitive creatures who had barely learned to travel between stars. "You cannot surrender," she said. "The Dominion does not take prisoners. They do not make slaves. They consume. If you surrender, every living thing in this galaxy will be absorbed into their hive mind. There will be nothing left of any of us." The ambassador spoke with cold logic. "The mathematics are clear. We cannot win. Continued resistance only delays the inevitable while increasing suffering. Surrender offers a chance, however small, of preservation." "Preservation as what?" Sarah demanded. "As food, as raw material. You would sacrifice your children to become nutrients for monsters." "We would sacrifice our pride to ensure survival. Humans are young. You do not understand the necessity of compromise." Sarah laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "You are right. We do not understand. We are young and foolish and primitive. We have only been among the stars for 200 years. But in those 200 years, we have learned one thing that you have forgotten in your 100,000 years of wisdom." She looked at each ambassador in turn. "Some things are worth dying for. And if we must die, we will make sure our enemies pay such a terrible price that they will remember us forever." The conquered voted to continue negotiations. Humanity voted to continue fighting. The alliance fractured, and then something unexpected happened. Humanity started winning. The recordings showed the first human counterattacks. They were not elegant. They were not sophisticated. They were brutal and ugly and absolutely terrifying. Human ships rammed enemy vessels, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Pilots would fly directly into Dominion carriers, detonating their engines at the last moment. They called it taking one with you. Human soldiers fought long past the point where they should have died. Wounded soldiers kept firing. Dying soldiers triggered explosives. Dead soldiers had their weapons passed to civilians who had never held a gun before. The Dominion could not understand it. Their hive mind calculated that humans should retreat when injured. They should surrender when outnumbered. They should break when their leaders died. Instead, humans fought harder. showed a recording of a Dominion commander trying to analyze human behavior. The creature spoke in a voice that sounded like thousands of whispers layered on top of each other. They do not follow logical patterns. When we destroy their cities, they become more aggressive. When we kill their leaders, new leaders appear immediately. When we offer them terms of surrender, they respond with attacks of increased ferocity. They appear to damage themselves in order to damage us. This serves no survival purpose. We do not understand. The humans called it spite, the willingness to hurt yourself if it meant hurting your enemy more. It was not logical. It was not rational. It was deeply, fundamentally human. But spite alone could not win a war. Humanity needed something more, and so they created the generation ships of vengeance. The recordings showed massive vessels being constructed in secret shipyards. Inside each ship were thousands of humans in frozen sleep. They were volunteers. They had agreed to be frozen for centuries, even to wake up in a future they would never see. Their mission was simple: keep fighting. No matter how long it took, no matter how many generations passed, keep fighting until the enemy was destroyed or there were no humans left to fight. They called it hatred inheritance. Parents passed their rage to their children. Children passed it to their. The war was no longer just a conflict. It was a family tradition. One recording showed a mother speaking to her daughter before entering frozen sleep. The girl was perhaps 10 years old. "I may not wake up for 1,000 years, the mother said. "You will be long dead by then. Your children will be dead. You will be dead, but I need you to promise me something." "What, Mama?" "Tell your children what they did to us. Tell everyone who comes after. Make sure they never forget, and make sure they never forgive." The girl nodded solemnly. "I promise, Mama, I will remember. We all will." The generation ships launched into the void. Centuries passed. The conquered had long since surrendered, their worlds absorbed into the Dominion. But the human ships kept coming, wave after wave, generation after generation. The Dominion had never faced an enemy like this. They had conquered species that were stronger, smarter, more advanced, but they had never conquered a species that simply refused to stop. After 3,000 years of continuous war, the Dominion did something they had never done before in 11 galaxies of conquest. They retreated. The recordings showed the last Dominion ships fleeing back to the void between galaxies. They left behind a message, broadcast on all frequencies. "We do not understand your kind. You fight without logic. You die without purpose. You continue when continuation serves no function. We have consumed 11 galaxies, but we will not consume yours. You are not worth the cost. We will find easier prey elsewhere." Humanity had won, not through strength or technology or numbers. They had won through sheer, stubborn refusal to accept defeat. And that was when the conquered made their decision. The elder species had watched from their surrendered worlds as humanity bled and died for 3,000 years. They had seen what humans were capable of. They had seen the spite, the hatred, the endless capacity for violence. And they were afraid. "If they can hate the Dominion that much," one ambassador said, "what happens when they hate us?" The vote was held in secret. 11 species voted yes. Only the voted no, arguing that humanity deserved gratitude, not punishment. They were ignored. The motion passed. Humanity was to be quarantined. All records were to be destroyed. The galaxy would forget that humans ever existed. When the conquered ships arrived at Earth to announce the quarantine, the human leaders listened in silence. When the announcement was finished, the human president spoke. "You are imprisoning us for saving you. We are protecting the galaxy from a dangerous species. We fought for 3,000 years. We died in numbers you cannot imagine. We saved every living thing in this galaxy, and this is how you repay us." The conquered ambassador had no answer. The quarantine was established. The warning beacons were placed. The records were erased. and humanity was left alone with their memories and their rage. In the archive of remembrance stood in silence as the final recording ended. Beside her, wept openly, his many eyes streaming with tears. "We did this," he said. "The Conquered did this. We punished them for saving us." Cole watched them with an expression that might have been pity. "Now you understand," she said. "Now you know why we remember, and now you must decide what you will do with the truth." Made her choice. She transmitted everything. Using equipment provided by the humans, she sent the complete historical record to every independent journalist, every academic institution, every free press outlet in conquered space. The truth spread like fire across dry grass. At first the Conquered tried to suppress it. They called it fake. They called it human propaganda. They arrested journalists and shut down news networks. But there was too much evidence. The records were too detailed, too old, too clearly authentic. Within weeks the story was everywhere. The 13th species, the Umbral Wars, the betrayal, 97,000 years of lies. Citizens of 100 worlds demanded answers. Protests erupted on the capital planets. The governments that had been built on the lie began to crack. The Elder Council convened an emergency session on Ascendance Prime. For the first time representatives of all 12 founding species gathered to address what they called the human question. Was not allowed to attend. She was considered a criminal now, wanted for treason and theft of classified materials. But she watched the proceedings through secret channels that had established during his years in exile. The council chamber was a vast dome filled with representatives from across the galaxy. At the center, the 12 eldest leaders sat in a circle of ancient stone chairs. They had held these positions for thousands of years. They had grown used to being obeyed without question. Today, they faced questions they could not answer. "The records are authentic," said the chief archivist. His voice was tired. "Our own analysis confirms it. The human species did exist. They did fight in the Umbral Wars, and we did vote to erase them." The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted accusations at each other. Some demanded immediate action against the humans. Others demanded punishment for the cover-up. A few, very quietly, suggested that perhaps an apology was in order. The eldest of the council members raised his hand for silence. He was a named ancient beyond measure, his body more machine than flesh. He had been alive during the original vote. He was one of the few who remembered. "I oppose this decision then," he said. "I oppose it now. What we did was wrong. We punished those who saved us because we feared what they might do. We became the monsters we accused them of being." "They were dangerous," another council member argued. "They still are. You saw the recordings. Their capacity for violence is beyond anything we can match." "Their capacity for sacrifice is beyond anything we can match as well," replied. "They died for us, millions of them, generations of them, and we repaid that sacrifice with imprisonment and erasure. What would you have us do? Apologize? Release them back into the galaxy? They have been nursing their hatred for 97,000 years. If we open that quarantine, they will destroy us." Was quiet for a moment. "Perhaps, or perhaps we could try trusting them. We never gave them that chance." The debate continued for hours. Finally, a vote was called. The motion was simple. Should the Conquered open diplomatic relations with humanity and begin the process of reconciliation? 11 species voted no. Only voted yes. But the council was not finished. Another motion was proposed, one that makes blood run cold. The human threat must be neutralized. They have had 97,000 years to build weapons and train soldiers. If they escape their quarantine, they will seek revenge. We must act first. I propose containment protocol final, the complete sterilization of the Sol system. The vote was called. This time, 11 species voted yes. Stood slowly, His ancient body trembled with rage. You would commit genocide against the species that saved us all. You would murder billions of innocents because you are afraid of what they might do. We would protect the galaxy from a clear and present danger. You would become the Umbral Dominion. You would become the very thing they died to stop. The Council ignored him. Orders were sent to the combined fleet. The largest armada assembled in 100,000 years would travel to Sol and end the human threat forever. That knight did something he had never done in his long life. He broke the law. He accessed the classified archives himself. He gathered every piece of evidence, every recording, every document that proved what the Conquered had done, and he broadcast it all on every frequency to every world in every language. The broadcast included the original vote. It included the recordings of human sacrifice. It included the Council's decision to commit genocide. Nothing was hidden. "Citizens of the Conquered," said in his message, "you have been lied to for longer than most of your civilizations have existed. The truth is now before you. What you do with it is your choice." On Ascendance Prime, security forces came to arrest him. He did not resist. As they led him away, he sent one final message. This one went to Earth. "Humans of Sol, the fleet is coming. They mean to destroy you utterly. I am sorry. I was not strong enough to stop them then, and I am not strong enough to stop them now." He paused, gathering his strength for his final words. "I pray you have not forgotten how to be what they fear." On Earth, Cole received the message in the command center of New Geneva. Around her, human officers watched the screens showing the approaching fleet. 5,000 warships, the combined military might of 12 species. "Director," said Admiral Wei, commander of the Human Defense Fleet, "our ships are ready. We can launch immediately." Studied the screens. She thought about 97,000 years of isolation. She thought about generations of children asking why the stars had abandoned them. She thought about all the promises made to remember, to never forgive. "How many ships do we have?" she asked. 20,000 combat-ready vessels. Another 30,000 in reserve. Who had returned to Earth with after her broadcast stared at the Admiral. 20,000. The report said your technology was primitive. Admiral smiled. It was not a reassuring expression. "We let them think that. We have been preparing for this day since the quarantine began. Every generation has added to our strength. Every child has trained for the war we knew would eventually come. You knew they would try to destroy you. We hoped they would not. We prepared for the possibility that they would." Raised her hand. The room fell silent. "We have waited 97,000 years for this moment. We have built our ships. We have trained our soldiers. We have nursed our grievances and remembered every wrong." She looked at the screens showing the approaching fleet. "And now we must decide what we want to be. Avengers who prove every fear they ever had about us, or something else, something they never expected." Admiral frowned. "Director, with respect, they are coming to kill us, every man, woman, and child. This is not the time for philosophy." "This is exactly the time for philosophy, Admiral, because after we respond, there will be no going back. Whatever we choose to do will define humanity for the next 100,000 years." She turned to, "You came here looking for the truth. You found it. You shared it with the galaxy. Now I have a question for you, Archivist. If you were us, what would you do?" Had no answer. She had uncovered a terrible crime, but she had not thought about what came next. She had not imagined standing here, in the command center of a species that had every right to hate her, being asked to help decide the fate of the galaxy. "I do not know," she admitted. "I only know that more violence will not undo what was done. It will only create new wounds." Nodded slowly. "That is what I think too. Admiral, hold our fleet. We will not fire first. And if they fire on us?" His eyes hardened. "Then we remind them why they were afraid of us in the first place, but not until then. not 1 second before. The human fleet held its position, and the galaxy held its breath. The combined fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system, 5,000 warships carrying the firepower to destroy a dozen worlds. Their orders were simple: leave nothing alive. Fleet Admiral of the command ship watched the sensor displays with cold satisfaction. This would be quick. This would be clean. This would end the human threat forever. Then the sensors updated, and his satisfaction turned to ice. Human ships were appearing everywhere. They rose from the shadows of moons and asteroids. They emerged from hidden bases on every planet. They poured out of shipyards that had been invisible until this moment. 20,000 ships, then 30,000, then more. "This is impossible," whispered. They were supposed to be primitive, isolated, weak. His tactical officer's voice trembled. "Admiral, their ships. They are not like our records suggested. They are heavily armed. Their shields are reading at levels we cannot explain, and they are still launching more." The human fleet did not attack. They simply took position, forming a wall between the conquered armada and Earth, waiting. A communication signal came through. Admiral opened the channel. A human female appeared on his screen. She was older, with gray hair and tired eyes. Behind her, the human command center was calm. No one was panicking. No one was afraid. "I am Director Cole of the United Earth Government," she said. "You have entered our space with hostile intent. Before you act, I want you to hear something." Laughed. "You want to negotiate. You are in no position to negotiate. Your species is about to be exterminated." "I do not want to negotiate. I want to talk. Will you listen?" Something in her voice made pause. It was not fear. It was not anger. It was something else. Something he could not identify. "Speak," he said. Nodded. "I am going to broadcast this to your entire fleet and to every ship that carries recording equipment. I want everyone to hear." She pressed a control. Her face appeared on every screen in every ship. Conquered soldiers across 5,000 vessels stopped what they were doing to watch. 97,000 years ago, my species fought a war to save the galaxy. We were the smallest member of the conquered, the youngest, the weakest. When the Umbral Dominion came, every other species calculated that survival was impossible. They chose to surrender. She paused to let the words sink in. "We chose to fight, not because we thought we could win, not because it was logical or rational or smart. We fought because we could not accept a universe where our children would be consumed by monsters. We fought because some things matter more than survival." Images appeared on every screen, recordings from the archive of remembrance, human ships ramming enemy carriers, human soldiers dying by the thousands, human families saying goodbye before entering frozen sleep. The war lasted 3,000 years. We lost more people than most species have ever had. We sacrificed everything we were so that the galaxy could survive. And when the Dominion finally retreated, when we had won a victory that logic said was impossible, we expected gratitude. Her voice hardened. Instead, we received imprisonment. The conquered voted to quarantine our world and erase us from history. They told the galaxy we were extinct. They made it illegal to even speak our name. For 97,000 years, we have been alone in the dark, waiting for the day the galaxy would remember. She looked directly into the camera. "Today, you have come to finish what you started. You have come to kill every last human so that the truth will die with us. And I want you to know something." Admiral leaned forward despite himself. Across the fleet, thousands of soldiers held their breath. "We could stop you. Look at your screens. Count our ships. Calculate our firepower. We have spent 97,000 years preparing for this day. We have weapons you cannot imagine. We have soldiers who have trained their entire lives for this moment. We could destroy your fleet and everyone in it." Looked at his tactical displays. The human numbers were overwhelming. His 5,000 ships were surrounded by 50,000. The human technology readings were off the charts. She was not bluffing. "But we are not going to do that," continued. "We are not going to kill you. We are not going to take revenge. We are not going to prove that you were right to fear us." Confusion rippled through the conquered fleet. This was not what they expected. Humans were supposed to be violent, spiteful, dangerous. They were supposed to attack. 97,000 years ago, we learned to hate. We passed that hatred down through generations. Parents taught children to despise the galaxy that abandoned them. We remembered every wrong, every betrayal, every year of isolation. We have had more time to nurture our rage than most civilizations have existed. She paused, and we are choosing to let it go. The images on the screens changed. They showed Earth as it was now, cities full of life, children playing in parks, families eating dinner together, ordinary people living ordinary lives. We choose to be more than what was done to us. We choose to prove that humanity is not just capable of spite and vengeance. We are also capable of forgiveness, not because you deserve it, not because what you did was acceptable, but because holding on to our hatred would turn us into exactly what you accused us of being. Took a deep breath. "I'm not asking you to trust us. I am not asking you to like us. I am only asking you to stop, turn around, go home. Tell the galaxy what you saw here today. Tell them that when humanity had the chance to destroy those who wronged them, they chose mercy instead." She stopped speaking. The screens went dark. Silence filled the void between the fleets. On the conquered flagship, Admiral sat frozen. His orders were clear. His duty was clear. But the words he had just heard were burning in his mind. They chose mercy. Across the fleet, similar scenes played out. Soldiers who had come expecting monsters found themselves facing something else entirely. They had been told humans were dangerous because of their capacity for violence. No one had prepared them for this. The first ship to stand down was a small cruiser commanded by a young officer. He simply powered down his weapons and broadcast a single message: "I will not fire on people who refuse to fire on me." Other ships followed, one by one, then in groups, then in waves. Weapons went offline. Engines reversed. The great fleet that had come to commit genocide began to fall apart. Admiral watched his command disintegrate. He could order them to attack. Some would obey. But it would mean civil war among his own forces. It would mean proving the humans right. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, he gave the only order he could. "All ships stand down. We are returning home." The conquered fleet departed. They left behind no dead, no debris, no evidence that the confrontation had ever happened. Only the human ships remained, watching in silence as their ancient enemies retreated. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. The Elder Council collapsed. Governments fell on 100 worlds. The species that had voted to erase humanity now demanded accountability from their own leaders. New governments rose from the chaos. They reached out to Earth, offering apologies and asking for reconciliation. It would take generations to heal the wounds of 97,000 years, but for the first time, healing seemed possible. Was released from prison and hailed as a hero. He traveled to Earth, the first official representative of the conquered to visit humanity in nearly 100. When he stepped off his ship, he knelt before Cole and begged forgiveness on behalf of his entire species. Helped him to his feet. "We have already forgiven you," she said. "Now we must learn to forgive each other." Stayed on Earth. She had nowhere else to go. The repository had declared her a criminal, and the galaxy she had known was falling apart. But she found a place among the humans, helping them share their history with the wider universe. One day, months after the confrontation, she stood in a park in New Geneva watching human children play. Admiral found her there. "You look troubled," he said. Nodded slowly. "I keep thinking about what you could have done. Your fleet was larger than theirs. Your technology was better. You could have destroyed them completely. Yes. Why did you not? After everything they did to you, how could you show them mercy? Admiral was quiet for a moment, watching the children laugh and run. Because destroying them would have been easy, he finally said. Any species can learn to hate. Any species can learn to kill. But proving that you can be better than those who hurt you, that is the hardest thing in the universe. And humanity wanted to prove something. Smiled. Humanity has always had something to prove. 97,000 years ago, we proved we could fight harder than anyone believed possible. Today, we proved something more important. What is that? That the galaxy was wrong about us. Not because we are not dangerous. We are. Not because we cannot hate. We can. But because we also have a choice. We can be more than our worst impulses. We can be better than what was done to us. Watched the children playing beneath an open sky. These were the descendants of soldiers who had died in the Umbral Wars, the great of people who had sworn eternal vengeance. They carried 97,000 years of rage in their blood. And they were laughing. Humanity was erased because we could not be broken, said softly. We returned to the stars because we refused to become the monsters they made of us. And that, archivist, is the most human thing of all. Did not respond. She simply stood and watched the children play, thinking about the strange species that had saved the galaxy twice, once through war and once through peace. She thought she was beginning to understand them at last.